We had some daylight pictures of him for October 23rd, 24th, 25th. Had pictures of him at noon on this scrape because it was close to bedding on the edge of a secluded field. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's toast. We need to get out there and go kill this deer because I had a local guy checking the cameras for me. Well, he sent me those pictures and, here's Scrape Master, middle of the day. And sometimes at 3:00, I'm just like, geez, we got to get out there. And so by the time I was able to get out there, it was the beginning of November. And man, he just wasn't there. We hunted where we needed to hunt, where I knew that we would encounter him. And he just was not around, wasn't getting his pictures. So I thought he either got killed or something, or he just was off the farm with another doe, which I think that's what exactly happened because...
Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, powered by Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, episode number 218. Ben Rising. Barometers, cold fronts, October 23rd, and rule number 1. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Covert Scouting Cameras and Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
This is Bill Vale from PressureDeerPro.com, and you're listening to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey, I'm Blake Galma, the host of The Outdoor Experience. You're listening to the Big Buck Registry.
This is Sean Smith with Whitestone Trophy Ranch and Deer Star Breeders out of Houston, Texas. And you're about to listen to my number one podcast, Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. My name is Jay, and for Dusty Phillips and Jim Keller, I'd like to welcome you to the show. A couple of things I would like you to do for us if you could. If you would, please, go check us out on iTunes. Subscribe. Leave us a review. We're going to try and push this podcast up the charts. I know we have a lot of listeners out there, and I need you to take some action. I need you to go and leave a review on iTunes and subscribe to the show. If you do subscribe, that'll give you access to this show each and every week with a notification on your iPhone. If you're not on an iPhone, don't worry about it. But you can access this show on YouTube in its entirety, on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio. It's all right there for you to grab and listen as you please. Here's a quick word from our friend Tom McMillan from the Sportsman's Channel on hashtag Deer Week. Tom, tell me about hashtag Deer Week. What's that all about?
Deer Week is going to be a celebration of the great sport of deer hunting that we all know and love. It's going to be on both the Sportsman's Channel. I'm going to be hosting it on the Sportsman's Channel. A friend of mine, Michael Waddell, you may have heard of him. He's going to be the host. Yeah, he's going to be the host on Outdoor Channel. And there's even going to be some kind of going back and forth, some riffing between Michael and I with some split screen stuff. And hashtag Deer Week is how the viewers, the listeners out there can share their deer hunting stories. They can ask questions. They can be involved. And it's just, it's something that the Outdoor Sportsman's Group celebrate. This is basically the society that we all are of deer hunters. Every episode is going to be what they either consider to be one of the most informative deer episodes that they've ever got, or their favorite deer hunt, or maybe even a collaboration of all the above. Starting October 15th on each network, Sportsman's Channel and Outdoor Channel, 7 Eastern. Everybody needs to be tuning in for Deer Week.
Our interview this week is with Ben Rising. Ben's reputation in the whitetail world is no secret. With many Boone and Crockett bucks to his credit, it's easy to see why hunters want to know more. Ben's dad started trapping and hunting with Ben when he was just a toddler. He credits his woodsmanship, deer, and habitat knowledge to his father and the older generations of people who spent time with him in the outdoors. Ben has been in the forest industry since the age of 16 and started his own logging business at the age of 20. Ben now works as a forester/timber buyer for a local sawmill and as an outfitter for Wicked Ridge Outfitters. We'll get to our interview with Ben Rising in just a moment, but before we do, let's check in with Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week: key deer scramble through debris after Hurricane Irma. This story was originally featured on the ABC Local 10 News website and was reported by Andrea Torres. Hurricane Irma's 130-mile-an-hour winds damaged the fence surrounding the National Key Deer Refuge in Big Pine Key, so a few deer were looking through debris in a residential area and exploring areas along US 1 in packs. Miami-Dade police officer Rick Bravo told the Florida Weekly Thursday that drivers in Big Pine Key needed to be careful because the deer are everywhere. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission has yet to determine how the endangered population of about 1,000 deer fared after the Category 4 storm. Authorities moved quickly to rescue survivors and rushed to deliver water and food to the people who braved the storm in the Florida Keys. Big Pine Key remains closed to the public. They smuggled deer to Forest County, Mississippi, feds say, but that wasn't the only problem. This story was originally featured on the Sun Herald website and was reported by Robin Fitzgerald. White-tailed deer smuggled from Pennsylvania to a Forest County ranch came from a herd that tested positive for chronic wasting disease, according to the U.S. Attorney General's office in Hattiesburg. 2 Louisiana men now face a federal charge of violating the Lacey Act, which prohibits importing live white-tailed deer into Mississippi. Edward L. Donaldson, Jr., 75, and John Jared Ortling, 42, both of Pearl River, Louisiana, are charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office following investigation of deer found at a 1,031-acre high-fenced enclosure in Forest County. Donaldson and Ortling manage the property known as the Turkey Trot Ranch. Jill Donaldson, who is Ortling's wife and Donaldson's daughter, owns the ranch. The men conspired from February 2010 through November 2012 to smuggle deer from Pennsylvania and Indiana into Mississippi from Louisiana holding pens for breeding and killing trophy white-tailed buck deer in Forest County, the charging document says. According to the court document, in a 3-month period, Ortling executed promissory notes in excess of $200,000 to buy more than 55 white-tailed deer for delivery to Louisiana holding pens in Lake Charles, Carencro, and Franklinton. Several deliveries of deer were taken in trailers to the Turkey Trot Ranch. Ortling and Donaldson learned in November 2012 that the deer from Pennsylvania were infected, and Oberling directed that all deer at the ranch be released into a 1.6 square mile fenced enclosure. The Lacey Act of 1900, or simply the Lacey Act, is a conservation law in the United States that prohibits trade in wildlife, fish, and plants that have been illegally taken, possessed, transported, or sold. A Mississippi law effective in May 2016 prohibits big game hunters from bringing carcasses from the deer family into the state. Hopefully the state of Mississippi will throw the book at this reckless act. Secretary Zinke signs orders to support sportsmen and enhance wildlife conservation. This story was originally featured on the Outdoor Hub website. With a move that clearly demonstrates how the Trump administration is actively working to support hunting and other outdoor recreation on public lands, U.S. Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke gave his stamp of approval for an order that will help ensure sportsmen and women continue to have opportunities for high-quality recreational experiences on public lands and potentially private lands. Here's a summary of the press release from the U.S. Department of the Interior. U.S. Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke signs Secretarial Order 3356, which will support and expand hunting and fishing, enhance conservation stewardship, improve wildlife management, and increase outdoor recreation opportunities for all Americans. Secretarial Order 3356 is an extension of Secretarial Order 3347, issued on Zinke's first day, March 2, 2017. That order identified a slate of actions for the restoration of the American sportsman conservation ethic, which was established by President Theodore Roosevelt. The new order comes days after the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service announced a survey that found there are 2.2 million fewer hunters in America now than in 2011. The order seeks to improve wildlife management and conservation, increase access to public lands for hunting, shooting, and fishing, and puts a new and a greater emphasis on recruiting and retaining new sportsmen conservationists with a focus on engaging youths, veterans, minorities, and other communities that traditionally have low participation in outdoor recreation activities. Hunting and fishing is a cornerstone of American tradition, and hunters and fishers of America are the backbone of land and wildlife conservation, said Secretary Zinke. The more people we get outdoors, the better things will be for our public lands. As someone who grew up hunting and fishing on our public lands, I know how important it is to expand access to public lands for future generations. Some of my best memories are hunting deer or reeling in rainbow trout back home in Montana, and I think every American should be able to have that experience. Today's secretarial order is the latest example of how the Trump administration is actively moving to support hunting and other forms of outdoor recreation on public lands. This means finding ways to expand hunting and fishing on public lands, improving access, and taking necessary actions to facilitate the enjoyment of these time-honored activities by any member of our society. In addition, Secretary Zinke recently made recommendations to President Trump on 27 national monuments that call for changes to some that, while still protecting the land, would allow, protect, and expand public access to that land for citizens who want to hunt, fish, and hike and experience the joy and beauty of these special places. Next week, I will cover the specific items listed in this order. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have any questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller with the Deer News. And without further ado, here is Ben Rising. Ben Rising, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you, Jay?
I'm doing well, man. Doing well. It's a good day when deer season is right around the corner, and I'm talking to somebody that has come heavily requested.
Cool.
So
yeah, I'm glad to be on.
I'm glad you could join us, Ben. It's been a project in the works that a friend of mine had alluded to that we should reach out to you. He was a big fan, and I started watching your stuff, and now I'm a big fan as well. And you're appropriate for our crowd, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I hear you guys got a lot of big buck followers.
We do. We do. And they're nutty. They're absolutely nutty, and they are diehards, let's put it that way.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's most of us real good deer hunters are.
Right. Isn't it uncanny how that is? Usually the good hunters are the ones that are the most passionate.
Yep. It's about like in everything, I guess.
Right.
What you put your heart and your mind into that's what, I think you can be good at anything if that's what your focus is on.
That's absolutely right. When did you start focusing on deer hunting, Ben?
The deer hunting probably hit me at about the age of 13, or probably hit me about 12, but I started deer hunting at the age of 13.
Gotcha. So that was in your youth, and where was home at that time?
Northeast Ohio, which is still my home.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in a little town called Windham, Ohio, and I still live basically in the southern part of Northeast Ohio. I live about 2 hours south of Windham now, but a lot more remote, hilly country, more deer.
Gotcha. Did you have a mentor growing up? Was there somebody that showed you the ropes?
I've had a few different people in my life, as a youngster. My dad, I grew up trapping with my dad, as a youngster, and he was a predator caller and trapper. So, I learned a lot about scent and wind directions and things like that from predator hunting at a young age. And so that naturally rolled into deer hunting, once I started to learn what deer were about and how they worked. I had a few friends of my dad's that were deer hunters. My dad really wasn't a deer hunter much. He became a deer hunter as he saw I liked it, and he wanted to do what I wanted to do. So, which was nice. So then he went ahead and supported that habit for me, helped me get some archery tackle and things like that. But, as far as the deer hunting goes, I had some people that would take me out, kind of give me some basics, but I really taught myself, I'd say for the most part, on the deer hunting side of things as I grew.
Gotcha. What, do you remember the first firearm you ever shot?
Yeah, 410.
The 410, that's a good one.
Yep, 410.
That was my big caliber after I graduated from the 22. My dad said, all right, time to move up a caliber here, kid.
Yeah, well, I should say that my first shotgun I owned was a 410, but I might have shot a 22 pistol or something like that beforehand, probably. Yeah, most likely a 22 pistol, because that's how we used to dispatch of raccoons and fox sometimes. If you
that's right.
In a trap. So
yeah, we were dispatching woodchucks as they were trying to eat our garden.
Yeah.
Yep. When you were growing up, do you recollect your first deer hunting experience?
Oh, some of my greatest memories are probably when I was younger, when I was at those virgin years of learning deer and how to get around and where to put, just what I look back now and go, the dumb things I did, but yet those are some of my fondest memories of those encounters and those situations of being raw and, just, I don't know why, but those memories are etched in my mind forever,
Right.
Across the creeks where I lived and hunting the woods that I grew up hunting in and the smell of fall and, making your own tree stands and just all that kind of stuff was just part of what makes you who you are.
It's interesting you say that. Tell us a little bit about the tree stands you used to make.
Well, we didn't do a lot of like homemade wood stands,
Okay.
In the trees. My dad, we actually made some out of 3/4-inch plywood, and we would take conduit and smash the ends of the conduit in a vise, and then we drill holes through it and make supports and backings. And they were actually pretty darn good stands. I don't know that I'd ever let my kids sit in one today, but it was amazing what you went through back in those days and what you did and how different the world was. We didn't even know what a safety belt was back and then, probably. Now I'm going back into they probably had them, but it wasn't as big of a factor as it is now about how safe you should be in a tree.
Right.
We're talking mid 80s.
Yeah, the mid 80s when things weren't nearly as safe as they are now, and neither was the push or the whole concept.
Yeah. I'm 43 now, so back in it was been like 88, 89, and those years was when I was really starting to try to get into the deer hunting. I never became good at it, till as far as like consistently killing good deer or decent bucks, till later, but was always on deer and encountered deer and missed a lot of deer.
Okay. So being a self-taught hunter is what we usually hear from the self-taughts that are good deer hunters today. It's usually trial and error. You learn a lot from your mistakes. Failure is a good thing, kind of tone.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe touch on some of the mistakes that you made that led to your trigger point, per se, where you were actually killing more deer than not?
I would say learning to hunt smarter and not harder.
Okay.
Once you figure out, when I was younger, and really not even just all that much long ago, I just wanted to hunt all the time. I just wanted to be out there. When I had, as soon as I get off work from logging all day or whatever, I wanted to hunt. Mm-hmm. And, and I still do that to a point, but I'm picking certain farms and I'll go hunt on like that just to hunt does or take my boys hunting or something like that, but when it comes to certain big deer now, timing is everything, knowing those deer, knowing how they work and what factors are going to push them around and make them do things, get them up off their bellies.
Okay. All right. Let's explore some of that if we could. Like, when do you know when it's time to hunt?
Well, every deer is different. I think every deer has a personality. Some deer are just completely nocturnal freaks, but, they're still going to have a time that they are going to move. And sometimes those times are, during daylight hours, or you really got to get close to them in their bed, but that's a really touchy situation, hunt deer like that. Most deer, for the most part, I think that if they're in areas that, the pressures, every deer has some kind of hunting pressure, I think, in the United States anymore, pretty much. There's so many hunters that I think most deer experience some kind of pressure, but they're always going to feed, they're always going to get up, and they're always going to breed. Okay. So, taking advantage of knowing moon patterns, which I'm a big believer in the moon, a lot of people argue that, but for my results, I don't see how anybody can say that it doesn't affect deer movement, especially big bucks. Weather patterns, definitely can affect deer movement. And so, I try to align those things and capitalize on them, go by my cameras, what they're telling me. Sometimes that's all you need is just a trail camera to tell you what a deer likes to do, or as he's getting closer to daylight or dark every time on a camera, then at some point he's just getting earlier all the time and moving. And so, that you need to get in there.
Gotcha. Let's go back to moon phase and moon studies for a sec. You had said that some people don't believe in that, but I'm hearing this more and more. There seems to be a handful of people that actually hunt and kill, the emphasis on and kill big deer, tend to follow this moon phase strategy. Can you break down how you go about reading moon charts, and when do you decide it's time to go?
Well, I'll tell you, for one, a chart that'll save a lot of people a lot of headache and a lot of guesswork is the Moon Guide, which Adam Hayes puts out,
Right.
Which is an awesome tool. Adam's a buddy of mine. He's a big buck killing fool too,
Yep.
and
former guest on this show, actually.
Yeah, could. Yep. A good guy to have. So,
yep.
Basically what I look at is basically just like the Moon Guide will tell you. It's you're looking for those phases where the moon times, where the moon peaks underfoot or overhead at the, an hour and a half before peak times of normal deer movement, before dark or right after daylight, in the mornings, catching deer coming back to bed or, catching deer moving early to feed. You align those patterns early season for food sources, whether you're in between a food source and a bedding area or you're on the edge of a food source and you're catching those deer coming to that food source. Pre-rut, you align those moon patterns with, scrape hunting type of stuff. Like I'm a big believer in hunting scrape lines in the pre-rut, especially close to bedding areas or doe bedding areas.
Okay.
Or in between the two. You can really capitalize on a big mature buck's dominance factor at that time of year. So you line up those types of deals with the right weather too. If you add a little weather in there that can kick them up, a little cold front or just a little change in the stagnant hotter weather to a little drop in temperature or some high barometers, that all factored in can really make the difference on how a deer feels and when he's going to move.
Okay. So weather, you pay attention to weather, it sounds like quite a bit. And are you looking for changes in barometric pressure and cold fronts, and what specifically do you get excited about?
Anything over 30.1.
Okay.
Yeah. Once you start getting up in there, 29 and up is good, but you start getting over 30, then you've got, especially after a super cold front, like late season when you've had some nasty weather,
mm-hmm.
And you, like everybody talks about hunting the cold front. I'd rather hunt after the cold front, personally. I'd rather hunt the high pressure after.
Interesting. Okay. What tools do you use to monitor pressure? There's all kinds of different ways to do it. Is there anything in particular that you pay attention to?
A lot of times, just, apps that you can get on your phone, there's multiple ones, like the Weather Channel, I look for the hourly, but there's some other more detailed. IntelliCast is one that I use quite a bit. It's pretty detailed and will tell you, all the things that I'm looking for.
Okay.
But I also think Scout Look, the hunting weather app.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a pretty good app. There's some other apps out there now that are kind of coming on that, can do the same things, but I've always had good luck with Scout Look, and I'm not even sponsored by them. I'm plugging them, but I like them.
Right.
I like the app. I think it's simple to use.
Very cool. Now let's explore your camera use a little bit more. You said you like to use a camera to monitor some of the deer. Maybe it's just another tool. Sounds like you have a lot of tools that you use, and it's almost like a puzzle when you try to put it together. How does the camera play into your strategy?
Well, by placing trail cameras in the right areas, that's going to tell you what your deer are doing. It kind of also tells you about a deer's nature, his personality, and the other thing is learning how to run those cameras and not putting them in places where you're going to be checking them all the time and intruding into deer. And, basically so many guys hurt themselves running trail cameras because they can't take it. They got to know what's on that camera. They may have a good spot.
Right.
And they may get a picture of that buck one or two times, and then they just keep going back and back and back and back. And then eventually no more buck,
So what do you do in that situation?
Well, I'm a big believer on perimeters and edges. I feel deer have zones, and I talk about this in my show, Whitetail Edge. I don't know if any of your listeners are following that show at all, but it's airing on Carbon TV, and we upload it to YouTube also, and then we have a website, whitetailedge.com. But, we talk a lot about those kind of things, and I feel deer have zones. And, secondary zones, primary zones. Secondary zone is a feeding area where deer are used to encountering farmers, fields, gates opening, people, four-wheelers, tractors. You can get away with a lot more. I think it's just natural. Even if you go clear back to the movie Bambi, where they show the deer coming to the edge of the opening of the meadow and looking for danger.
Right.
Well, deer just naturally associate those areas with people. So when a deer encounters your foot tracks or your smell in those areas, they're not as alarmed as they would be if you were 150 yards in the woods, on an oak ridge close to his bedding thicket, So I feel that's where a lot of guys mess up. They feel they got to go shove those cameras in funnels or out on ridges and acorn flats, or go 100 yards in the woods and dump corn, to try to get pictures of these deer, when in all reality, you're just hurting yourself. Your neighbors are probably doing that, so you don't want to do that.
Gotcha. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about hunting the dominant buck? It doesn't appear that you're shooting small bucks, nor does it seem like you desire to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, and I've taken a lot of heat over this, even on social media, like people that follow you on social media, I've taken a lot of heat of like, I'm just a horn hunter, or, but in all reality of things, everybody's a horn hunter. I don't care what they say.
Mm-hmm.
The guy out there that's carrying a weapon in deer season that does not want to shoot a giant buck if he had the chance, and if anybody says that they don't, then that's who I'm going to call a liar. So
it's funny you say that. I think we have a passion for antlers, and yes, I agree. Some people say that they meat hunt only, but
but I'm going to tell you right now, 180-inch deer walks in front of that doe, he's going to blow a hole through that 180-incher before he is that doe.
Right, and I've seen this in action, even as in turkey hunting. A Jake, I was told that I'm an adamant meat hunter. Well, I called in 2 birds, or there were a bunch of birds, 4 Jakes and a Tom, and all the Jakes were there first. He didn't pull the trigger. He waited for that Tom.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's just natural. But I think, the ones that I usually take the heat from the most like that are the guys that really can't kill those deer, Right. So it's their way of venting and frustrating on me. So I take it, and, it is what it is. But, it's just got to that point in my hunting career, I guess, that's just where my challenge is. That's what I like. And, we did a teaser for Whitetail Edge, season 2 this year, and you can watch that also. And it's about, how I grew up logging and, what my challenge is of, it's hunting a dominant big buck. Normally those deer carry the biggest racks, and, I still love to go out and shoot does and harvest those. And when I'm out of state, and I only got 4 or 5 days to hunt, yes, my standards are not as high as my home state where I have all season to hunt and I only have 1 buck tag. And I have a chance to really figure out a buck. So yeah, I'm going to be more picky at home,
right.
But I still like to try to kill the biggest buck I can, or the most dominant buck I can, out of state even. I don't care if I only do have 5 days. That's my challenge, is trying to figure that deer out.
Okay. All right.
And, and it really all comes back to, you can't kill one if they're not there.
Rule number 1, right?
Yeah. And I mean, and there's some people that just don't live in areas, and so when we're talking about this dominant buck and the size, a deer that lives in, New Jersey or Delaware, or, parts of Pennsylvania, or, what I'm talking, the Northeast. If a guy is consistently killing 135-inch deer, 140-inch type deer in those areas, I would say that guy's a pretty darn good big buck killer, because its size is all relative to the area. It's not really about the score, but, all areas and regions of the United States grow different type of deer.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. It's very regional, geographic and nutrition.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't, it's, when I say big bucks, I guess, yes, I like to kill big scoring bucks, that's just, I just like it. But, for people listening, you may not live in an area that has 180-inch deer. So, if you're killing 5-year-old bucks that score 135, 140, you're really doing something.
Right.
Truly are.
How familiar do you get with the target buck? Like, how much effort goes into that? And maybe you're hunting out of state, and I would assume that getting familiar with their patterns might be a little more difficult than the one that's in your backyard. How do you go about structuring the backyard buck versus the one that you have to travel to get to?
Well, the backyard buck, obviously, the trail cameras can be monitored a little bit closely, or, you can have a little more most recent information to go by. You can really pick your times of hunting a lot better. And obviously more time to be able to scout if there's one around, or, to watch one, physically, or, kind of pick up on some weaknesses, and hone in on those and move your stands into place, or take advantage of that. To where when you're trying to go hunt deer 10 hours away, obviously cell cams can change that whole world right now, for a guy that's living out of state from where he's hunting. But, I still think that, you pick those times, you do your homework ahead, you look at the calendars, you look at the moon phases, and you try to plan your trips around those and the time of year, knowing where to hunt. Are you going to be hunting food sources? Are you going to be hunting doe bedding areas? Or are you going to be hunting travel corridors? What are you looking for, that time of year that you're hunting? And, line that stuff up and try to take advantage of that for the 5 days you're out of state, with cameras, and check your cameras.
Right. Does each buck have their own weakness?
I believe that, some deer can, I talk about that a lot too, that, every deer has a weakness. A lot of the deer may have the same weakness. Some can be girls, some can be food, some can be, a deer prefers no matter what to bed in a certain area a lot, or, some deer like certain areas to feed. Those are all weaknesses in my mind, that you can capitalize on. I've had deer live on the same 300-acre farm, and in a span of 3 years, literally have had deer never cross what I call the halfway mark in that 300 acres. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
It's just really weird. Like, they have these zones that they even will not cross. Like, that's so-and-so's, and it's just weird. But I mean, I've proven it to myself, and it just blows my mind. I mean, it really does blow my mind that you can have a farm for 3, 4, or 5 years and have the same deer on it, and you never ever get pictures of those deer at one end of the farm, but you get them at the other end all the time. And the other deer at the other end of the farm, certain bucks, not all, just saying certain bucks, and it's normally the big ones that act like this, that you will not get on the other guy's turf. It's just crazy.
Do you think they're that territorial?
I think, well, yeah, I do. I mean, I definitely, because, like, and I talk about this on one of the shows where I killed deer called High and Tight in season 1 of Whitetail Edge, where I noticed on the trail cameras that I had scattered around on that farm and kind of in this deer's core area, on the outskirts of his core, on scrapes, on the edges of fields, where I knew I could pick this deer up just in his natural nighttime movement, feeding patterns, scrapes, things like that, mineral licks. And, you just slowly start to see the other numbers of bucks disappearing because he's pushing them out, and he starts cruising. You start catching him at different times, and then as the pre-rut gets closer and closer, his clock just keeps getting longer and longer. He's moving more and more, and I slide in and kill him because he just told me that he was just too dominant. He couldn't take it. He was going to be one of the first guys really pushing between doe bedding areas, and that's right where I killed him.
Gotcha. When do you decide to make that move? I mean, how do you decide that it's time? He's pushed enough deer out. He's cruising too much. He's too obvious. How do you decide? And what do you do at that point?
Well, I mean, what makes me decide is, okay, do I have daylight pictures of this guy? Is it that evident that he's moving in daylight hours? And when you have that, that's really all the evidence you need, or a sighting of him doing that, and like that deer, I hadn't hunted him one single time. I waited for that opportunity. I waited for the cameras to tell me that that's what he was going to do. Yeah, you take the chance of maybe a neighbor shooting him at some point or something happened like that. But sometimes you just got to hope that the neighbors are doing the wrong things and he's smart enough to figure that out. Normally them big deer like that don't slip up too much until peak breeding, when their mind just gets too stupid.
Right.
But they're so unpredictable at that time that you can't pattern them. You're just, at that point, you're really relying on just being in a good funnel or lucky situation to really stick an arrow in one, I
was going to say the pattern changes because they get dumb and they get off their patterns. But
yeah.
It sounds like if you can, you're not quarantining them, but it's like you're drawing a line of, well, this is his zone. Now I got to figure out where he likes to be even when he gets dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, so like with that deer High and Tight, which he was 183, the way I worked that deer was I just got in between 2 doe bedding areas. Once I saw that he was cruising, and checking his scrapes more and doing those kinds of things. So then I decided that, I needed to be back in, where he was going to be checking doe bedding areas, from one to the other, but yet secluded in the timber. But I had a great access where I could get to him without disturbing a lot of deer. And that's a big factor.
Yep. Gotcha. When I was watching one of your more recent videos, I think it came out earlier in August, the Monarch 215, you had mentioned about sneaking in the cloak of darkness and under the cloak of the sound of the train. How often do you use sound to cover movement?
In that situation, it just worked out perfect, to have that. A lot of times, I try to figure out where I think those deer are going to be at the times that I'm trying to move in, to a spot. And so sometimes I don't be real quiet. Sometimes I just get in there as fast as I can.
Okay.
And kind of make that move that direction. But, it's just, but if you can use anything like that to your advantage, those are the keys. That's where a deer hunter's mind comes into play. You just always have to be paying attention for that kind of stuff. Can I use this to my advantage? Maybe somebody else isn't, type of thing.
What does hunting mean to you these days? More on a global aspect. Like, what's your philosophy of hunting?
Man, that in itself could take hours to talk about. It's hard to say.
It's a deep question. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I don't golf, I don't play softball. I don't do anything like that. I don't fish anymore. I turkey hunt and I deer hunt. I have family. So obviously my family and, stuff like that comes first. But, the deer, my work is timber business, logging. Mm-hmm. You have to do all those priorities first in your life. But I'll tell you, deer hunting is right there, with my passion as far as what I enjoy, Mm-hmm. And, so, I mean, it's been such a part of my life, and it's made such connections in life for me, with people and friends, and also drama, with big bucks comes heartache too. So
very true. Very true. Being a logger, how'd you get into logging?
I grew up by a local sawmill when I was younger. My brother started working there as a maintenance guy when he was younger in high school, just making extra money. And I'd always worked for farmers and stuff like that. And, that was just, so I just started working down there as he moved on, and I was old enough to work there. So I started there, and just eventually led me into the woods, at a young age. And the guy that owned that place, started teaching me how to cut timber. And I've just never done anything different as far as a living since, since about the time I was 20.
Have you, as a logger, you spend a lot of time in the woods. Have you ever been able to make some observations about deer habits relative to being in the woods?
Oh, sure. I mean, I constantly, and I think that's another thing. I truly believe that, 80% probably at least of being a consistent deer hunter, consistent deer harvester of a good deer, and even just deer in general, is being a good woodsman. Right. Woodsmanship is key. It amazes me how many people that I meet, it amazes me how many people I meet at shows or, just in general that love to deer hunt and have a passion for it, but struggle. But yet when you go and you walk their property with them or things like, they have no idea what kind of trees are on their properties. They don't know, species of, plants. They don't know, they can't see for, they look at landscape and they can't really figure out how a deer would use it, and I think some of that stuff is just a natural thing too, that some people just get and some people don't.
Right. Does it help to be a logger to understand landscape and
I mean, I'm not going to say that you got to be a logger to, kill. I had a guy actually it's funny because I actually had a guy make a comment on one of my Facebook things, says, well, what makes you a better hunter than me, because you work in the woods every day and I work in an office, and I was just kind of taken back from it, because I've never once said that that's what I feel, but I don't know how anybody could sit there and think that, a guy that spends 365 days a year walking through the woods would not have a little bit of advantage to a guy that can only spend the weekends.
I agree. I grew up around loggers. I did logging when I was growing up. I learned a lot about animal habitat and movement just from being there. I think, and that's like being there is such a huge asset. And if you're not there 5 days a week, how could you possibly learn as much as somebody if you're sitting in your office?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not knocking anybody that does that. It's just that, that statement really took me back, because in my mind, I'm just thinking, well, common sense would tell you that I may know or have seen just a little bit more than you might have, if you're stuck behind a desk 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, when my office is the woods, and that's what I do every day. And, I'm walking, I can't even tell you how many properties I walk in a span of 365 days, estimating timber or, things like that. Logging jobs,
Sure.
So
yeah,
you just learn things. And when you walk those properties and you see how the deer, so to me, it's a challenge. Every time I step foot on a place, in my mind, I'm always thinking, before I get there, if I'm looking at an aerial or whatever, I try to already pick out spots where I think I'm going to see certain things of a deer. And it's amazing, what you pick up over time. It's like a game I play with myself.
Right. Well, it makes sense. You notice things. You can draw conclusions, and after a while, they become patterns. And it seems like you're in a natural environment to, especially if you have to look at aerials to decide a cut or whatever it is you're doing, and then step foot in there, and voila, my predictions are accurate or inaccurate. If you do that a number of times, you're going to start to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like and people make that accusation of, well, if I had the land to hunt that you have, I could kill the same kind of deer. And, that's not necessarily true, and I don't really have any better land than most people. I'm just like anybody else. I don't own thousands of acres of ground. I lease some farms. I have an outfitting business, so I have farms that we lease for that too. I have land that I lease for me and my family to hunt. I have farms that I just knock on doors and get permission to hunt. I've killed 4 of my booners on farms that other people could hunt, so it's not always just, I had some buddies of mine challenge me a couple years ago to go hunt public land in Iowa. They're like, well, if you're such a good hunter, go hunt public land in Iowa and kill a big deer, don't hunt private land.
Right.
So I accepted it. I accepted that challenge and did it. I killed a 158-inch 8-point on day 3.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
So,
gotcha.
And I'd missed a 170 that morning.
Wow. All right.
So, that was the worst part. Now I had a little help in that aspect of that, I'd befriended a really good friend of mine that kind of knew some of that public ground. And, he gave me pointers on where people see big deer in the summer. Mm-hmm. But you still have to put, any smart guy is going to ask questions when he gets into an area like that.
Right.
He's going to talk to people. He's going to save himself some time if he can, But I still feel confident that you could drop me in the middle of the woods anywhere that I've never hunted. And, not saying I'm going to kill the biggest deer in the woods, but pretty sure I could get guys on deer pretty quick,
Right.
And I think most guys out there these days can, there's so much information and educational stuff for people to watch and see that, most guys are pretty darn good hunters. I mean, most of the guys I meet at shows and that, they, they're good hunters. They got it figured out, and, they're getting better every year at, harvesting bigger deer, growing in their own challenges. And, that's fun to see, mm-hmm. It's, I do feel bad though, for some of the youngsters that are just starting out, that maybe do not have those mentors to teach them how to hunt, but they've got a taste of it, and they, are relying on TV to somewhat give them those pointers,
Yeah.
Because there is so many, I feel, shows that don't show it well enough to where people can, it's hard for youngsters to understand, how editing works, and that you can't make certain movements, you can't do certain things, and you're not just going to go sit in a tree stand every time and shoot a big buck, or a deer, period. So even like my show is probably guilty of that to a degree of not, people understanding that, look, it's not like every time I go sit in a stand, I shoot a booner, but, we try to touch on that educational factor for people to where we can give them little tidbits of information that really may set them apart that they're not going to learn from just watching a regular show.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the scouting aspect of it kind of helps to put together that puzzle and that plan. You're talking to people. People are very valuable if you can get them to talk to you about it, about the deer they're seeing. Plus your field scouting, your visualizations, your cameras, all that stuff kind of goes into a grand plan. And that grand plan helps you be more successful. It gives you a higher chance. And by chance, I mean chance. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it puts you in a more likely position to be able to take that shot.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the more tools that you use in your arsenal that can give you the edge, the better you are. I mean, it's just the more podcasts you listen to of successful people, the more articles you read of real deer hunters, that have really successfully had good success a long time. Normally you're going to pick up stuff, watching good TV shows, that are such as like Drury's 13, that's a great show. I mean, that Mark Drury and them guys are super good, which I filmed for them for years,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not being partial when I say this, but Mark is a deer nut. Mark knows deer. He figures deer out, and he has it, and people can learn a lot from people like that. They can learn things that would take them a lifetime to learn on their own, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with our show. It's just a little web show, but, I'm not trying to give all my secrets away, but I'm trying to help people have an advantage, that things that we've learned and mistakes we've made and learned from that may give them that edge right off the bat, starting out,
Right.
if they'll just listen and affect them,
What's the longest time it took you to figure out a deer before you're able to kill one?
I don't know. The biggest deer I ever hunted, I never killed. I mean, it sucked.
Okay.
But I just was not meant to kill that deer. He was, between 215, 218, I think, somewhere in there. But I just couldn't get to that deer. I mean, I encountered him 3 different times from November 2nd to the end of season. I encountered him 3 different times within 50 yards and could never get a shot at that sucker. And it just didn't work out, and I knew where I needed to be. And I think I could have killed him if I could have been there, but I couldn't get on those, I couldn't get that close to him to where he lived most of the time.
Okay.
And so I had to try to hunt him, based on just factors of when I thought he might go through where I could hunt and things like that. And I never did pull it off, but, probably my very first booner, I probably put more stand time in on that deer than any other booner I've killed since. But that deer taught me so much. That goes back to those factors of learning deer. And, that one was on video. It was like Whitetail Madness 6 back in like 2002 or 3 for Drury's.
Gotcha.
And big 9-point. And, it was awesome. I mean, you just learn a lot from a deer like that. You start learning from your mistakes, and I still ended up killing him on October 23rd. And it's funny, I've killed 2 or 3 booners on October 23rd.
Is that right? October 23rd. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Must be a special, a special day. What, that week, that final week always seems to be special. And I keep saying this over and over, but that October 20th to October 31st, that's
when you start seeing guys knocking them down.
That's right.
I mean, you really do. Those deer just start moving. They slip up. They start feeling antsy. They're just like anybody else. It's like they know the prom's coming.
Right. That's right. They know the prom's coming. That's a funny way to look at it. What's the shortest amount of time it's ever taken you to figure out a deer?
First time I hunted it.
Okay.
I mean, I shouldn't say, are you talking stand time or like amount of time spent before you hunt trying to figure the deer out?
Like you knew the deer was there and you hunted.
Yeah, I've killed 11 booners. And I'm not bragging when I say it, just trying to give people that are listening a perspective.
Yeah,
but on booner,
sure.
Yeah, on booner wise size deer, I've killed, trying to think how many I've killed on the first sit. I would say, I think there's only 2 of them, 2 out of the 11 that I hunted more than 3 times.
Really? Fascinating. Okay. So it sounds like that first time hunt means something.
Yeah. First, second time. I mean, you really, and I'm not saying that I do believe that the more you hunt a big deer in his core like that, or close to where he's at, you definitely are starting to diminish your chances. Do I think it's impossible to still kill him? Absolutely not.
Okay.
But definitely I feel your first 2 or 3 times in are your game changers,
Okay. Good to know. What would you say about tree stand etiquette in a sense? Not that you're being polite, but what are some of the things that you shouldn't do once you're in a stand and you have a deer approaching?
I think a lot of people, there's times you can get away with movement and there's times you can't. And I think that just all comes with experience and knowing and watching a deer, watching their body language, calling to deer. Guys can really mess up. being too aggressive. And then sometimes you need to be aggressive. I think that's just a factor of learning, deer body language and the time of year and what kind of mood those deer are in.
Okay.
Definitely can be a game changer if you're acting right and you're doing the right things. You can definitely put the odds in your favor if you're, hunting correctly.
Gotcha. What do you use for gear? Let's go down through your gear checklist. What do you prefer to use overall for weapons and camo and scent control?
Well, obviously, when you have a show, you have sponsors, but
sure.
For me, that was one thing that, like, when I started the show, I didn't want to just be sponsored by anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I went after the sponsors that I truly believed in.
Okay.
And I've since had some come after us that we have made deals with after I tried their products and I like them. And I've had some that I've denied because I didn't feel that they would hold up, or that, they just weren't to our standards, and I was not going to push it, because that's just one thing I don't want people to, relate Whitetail Edge to is, just a show that's going to go where the money is. Yes, it needs money to roll and it needs funding and things like that, but it's not all about, for me at this point, it's not all about just taking the biggest check from somebody or the most product amount, because there's not a lot of money in web shows right now. But, I don't want to just, that's the one thing I want my web show to be separated by, is that if people start to use the stuff that we're using, they're going to see results and they're going to like it and they're going to feel effective with it. And so, when it comes to archery, I love Hoyt. I can't say enough about that. I mean, Hoyt's been around forever. It's a big name, but it's a good bow. I love Rage broadheads. I shoot the Rage Extremes, killed 3 booners with it last year. I shoot, this year I'm going to try the Tri-Pan, just a huge cutting hole.
Yeah.
I think they're awesome. They're just killers. If you stay away from that shoulder and you hit them anywhere in the midsection, behind the shoulder and below the spine, you're going to thump them. You just give them the time,
Very cool.
But yeah, I don't know if that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, just getting an understanding kind of what gear you're using. Do you have a height preference in a tree stand setup?
I'll be honest, I've killed booners 8 feet off the ground, and then I've killed booners, 21, 22 feet. Do I think you need to get 30 feet? No. I think cover's the most important thing.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Very good.
I really do. I think background cover, outlines, things like that, good camo, which, we use Rocky Venator. It's a new camo that come out 2 years ago. And I'll tell you, it's an awesome camouflage. It's a mixture. It's just really something. If you watch our show, you're going to see it. And we've had so many people ask this year what that camo is we're wearing. And that's what it is. It's Rocky Venator.
Very nice. Very cool. All right. It sounds like you got a pretty good gear set up. I like that you're working with sponsors that you actually like. We're going to do that too.
Oh, yeah.
And believe in. What's the mission behind Whitetail Edge?
I would say to just basically not be known as some egotistical deer hunting show, but yet teach people, just normal guys, because we all are just normal guys that are, that film with us, and just try to basically giving some of our tactics away to the general public, and it could be from baiting deer to calling deer to, just strategically stand placing and hunting states that you can't use bait or anything like that, to food plot placement, teaching them how to plan food plots, how to run trail cameras. You take all those factors into consideration and having good equipment and tools to use, and it's just going to change how you hunt.
Gotcha. I completely agree with that. Let's talk about a deer hunt that you've been on, Ben, maybe a memorable one. We'd asked you to think of one in the beginning of the show, and I was wondering where we are going to venture here with you on this hunt.
Okay. You want to talk about, I remember so many, but I can remember from my first deer to first big deer to, just a certain deer. It's
sure.
You pick what you want to hear about.
How about your most challenging?
Yeah, challenging. Well, I'd say the biggest challenge was trying to hunt a deer that I couldn't kill, because he just didn't live on the property I was hunting. That's a challenge,
That's true.
But a successful challenge is, actually a deer that I killed last year, and it's on the show that we called Scrape Master on Whitetail Edge. Is a 183-inch deer. The deer was on my property for a fair bit. This hunting lease that I had in Illinois.
Okay, so it's Illinois.
This happened to be in Illinois, and it's one of those 5-6 day out of staters, and we had pictures of him. And
when did the hunt begin? Was it when you started getting pictures?
Yeah, well, I mean, he was the only good deer I had pictures of on the whole farm, like real shooter. Even like in August, and then I kept consistently getting pictures of him on this scrape that I'd created with some black widow deer lures the year before when I left, and then they just kept opening it up, and it was kind of a natural spot anyways for them to scrape, and they liked that area anyway. So I just, every time I'd go back to the farm, I would just, kind of redo it. And so that's why I called him Scrape Master, because I was using black widow deer lure Scrape Master scent in that scrape, and that's where I'd always get his picture.
Okay. All right.
And so that's how he got the nickname. And that deer ended up being, what happened was when we finally went out to hunt him, we had some daylight pictures of him in mid-October, late October, October 23rd, 24th, 25th, had pictures of him at noon on this scrape because it was close to bedding on the edge of a secluded field. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's toast. We need to get out there and go kill this deer, because I had a local guy checking the cameras for me because I didn't have cell cams there. And so he would check the cameras when I would ask him to every 2 or 3 weeks, just to kind of tell me what was around. And, we always run them on the edge, so you're not really intruding a whole lot. Well, he sent me those pictures, and, here's Scrape Master, middle of the day. And sometimes at 3:00, I'm just like, geez, we got to get out there. And so by the time I was able to get out there, it was the beginning of November, and man, he just wasn't there. We hunted where we needed to hunt, where I knew that we would encounter him, and he just was not around, wasn't getting his pictures. So I thought he either got killed or something, or he just was off the farm with another doe, which I think that's what exactly happened, because all of a sudden we got his picture after day 5 of just grinding it out for this deer. And I knew right then that, okay, he's back. We just got to keep hunting the way we were hunting. And we killed him the next day at 11:45 in the afternoon.
Gotcha. So,
and
they had some help from some friends to monitor, and then knew it was time. And it seemed like it was just the right place, right time. Basically.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, having my buddy check the camera for me, somebody that you can trust, that was a help. But in general, I'd have been there anyways at that time of year. But just knowing that deer was there and how he moved, I would have figured that out when I went in November and checked the camera. But it just gives you that little more confidence. So I do believe that networking with people can really be a big asset if they're people you can trust, especially if you're out of state,
Yeah, I agree. I think you can even do it in your own local area if you can find a couple people that you can trust and say, here's a camera. Can you just keep me posted? You can have the camera, but you can use the information too, but let me know what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, hunting has gotten, to a point where it can really be a competitive thing between people. And, you really don't like to see it that way, but it is the way it is. And, but you can make it funner if you got some guys that you can. I've always been kind of a loner, but as I started to do this show more, I've kind of loosened up on that just because I've had so much backstabbing on big deer, in the past.
Does that happen a lot?
I don't know so much about the backstabbing now, but, you get a lot of people that are just, they say things, but, they say things behind your back and about you and things like that, or that you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. But then, you run into those people at the store or whatever, and they're the first ones that act like you're their best friend and want to ask you questions.
Right.
But it's just part of the territory. Right. It's just what happens.
Right. Gotcha.
Any kind of any success breeds that kind of behavior.
Right. And anything. Yeah. It's not just
in anything. Right. Doesn't matter what it is.
Right. I agree. Well, let's run down to 10 rapid fire questions here, Ben, if you have time.
Sure.
All right. I didn't pre-prep you for these, so they're funner that way. All right. Let's go with number 1 here. What's your number 1 hunting tip of all time?
I 100% believe hunt smarter, not harder. You don't have to hunt every day. Hunt when it's right. Use the information you've gathered, all the work you've done all summer. Use that information to put your best effort into a couple hunts on the deer you're trying to kill.
Awesome. Great answer. I like that one. All right. We all have these things that we like to take into the stand with us or field, and we think they're good luck charms. They're just something special, some object. Maybe it's actually a useful tool. I don't know. But it drives us crazy if we don't have it with us. What's that one thing for you?
My bow.
That would be an obvious yes, definitely.
Yeah. No, I don't really have anything like that.
Some people don't. Yeah, some people do, some people don't.
I don't really have like a good luck charm, you know. I mean,
you just do your homework.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything I like that I go to, you know, like a special rock or a special knife or anything.
Yep.
You know, I just kind of hunt.
All right. Very good. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Neatness.
Neatness. Interesting. Okay. We have not had that as an answer to that question yet on the show. That's a good one.
I don't know. I'm like not a complete neat freak, but I just, you know, there's times that I'm completely disorganized because my life is just so full every day. But, you know, like my wife is super about keeping our house clean with 5 kids that we've raised, and, you know, just cleanliness, you know, just having, I don't know, like I like my vehicles to be nice inside. They're not always going to be nice on the outside because where I live, it's impossible in what I do. But, you know, I don't know. I'm a neat freak like that, in the sense, like my equipment. I keep Under Armour wipes in my tractor. That tells you how bad I am.
Okay, that explains everything. Got it.
You know, and I'm the same way with my deer hunting. You know,
right.
I mean, I really am, and I think that's how a guy has to be.
Okay, meticulous.
You know, if you skimp somewhere, it will cost you. You know. Very
good. Ben, how old are you today?
43.
43. What would you tell the 20-year-old Ben Rising, knowing what you know today?
About deer hunting?
Yeah, deer hunting, about life, anything like that.
Well, man, that list could be really long if I was to go back about just in life. But, you know, deer hunting wise, you know, actually, I'd like the 20-year-old to remind Ben Rising of today that hunting is supposed to be fun. You know, when you start having a show and people start expecting, you know, I've almost kind of created my own demise to a degree, because, you know, I've killed, you know, a fair amount of big bucks. And so everybody just expects that now, you know, and for a guy like me, if I don't shoot 170-inch deer, you know, nobody pays any attention, type of thing. You know what I'm saying? And so, but that can kind of take the fun out of things at times too, you know, so that's why having kids, you know, and hunting with them has really become a good, you know, big joy in my heart. You know, I've got a little 9-year-old boy right now that's just absolutely ate up with shooting his bow and running trail cameras. And, you know, we've got a local bowstring company here called Rogue Bowstrings, and they've kind of taken him under their arms a little bit and made him really feel like a part of something. And, you know, that's pretty awesome. They're actually coming out with a Whitetail Edge Edition bowstring this year. And,
nice.
You know, he feels like he's part of that. So it's kind of cool, you know, I mean, and that's what I tell everybody that's that age. You know, you see this stuff on social media where these 16-year-old kids are telling other guys that they'd pass that deer, he's not old enough to shoot. Dude, when I was 16, if it breathed, it died.
Right.
You know?
You're right. You're absolutely right.
And I don't mean like I just was murdering things, but I'm just saying, you know, deer hunting, you know, squirrel hunting, turkey, you know, just enjoy it, man. Go out there and enjoy what God has given us. And, you know, don't let that trophy aspect cloud your mind at a young age. Learn to hunt, learn to harvest animals, learn how to harvest them humanely, good kill shots. That will make you grow leaps and bounds in your hunting career, as far as when it's time to hunt those big deer, when you get on one, you know, by putting yourself in those situations.
Gotcha. Very cool.
You know,
very, very good answer. All right. So you're at a hotel lobby in a convention center somewhere in the world. It's hunting week, and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I usually tell them the truth.
Okay.
That I'm a logger.
All right.
You know, timber buyer. I mean, you know, but, you know, I tell them this is normally my answer is, you know, we're in the logging and timber business, but I have a deer hunting show on the side, you know, and I'm an avid hunter.
Gotcha.
I mean, I never deny the fact that I'm a deer hunter. I don't care where I'm at.
Right.
But I don't just come out telling people that I'm a deer hunter, you know, unless people ask, you know, because I've always been really humble about that fact of, you know, who I am and what I do, you know.
Right. Gotcha. What do you have, or what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Cup of coffee and a little mini raisin bagel.
All right. Very good. On the side of a highway, you can have your own billboard. It's a blank canvas. You can put anything you want on it. What would it say?
Trust God.
Excellent. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops in your head, and why?
Boy, that's a tough one right there. Man, there's so many people that I've met that have been successful, and some in so many different other ways, I guess. You know, I've seen some people that are successful that haven't made hardly any amount of money in their life, but they've raised good families, you know. Then I've seen people that have done both, and I've seen people that have. So I don't know. That's a tough one to answer. I mean,
that's a good answer. I mean, sometimes it's just not one person. Sometimes it's a group of people, and for different reasons. Yep.
I've just had different people, in my life that I've been, probably like one of the, I don't know, like you'd say, people with status that I think, Jim Thome is a guy that I know that, is a great person, has had an ultra successful career, smashing home runs, has made a lot of money, but is a super good guy, has good family, good values, and just a good moralistic person. So yeah, Jim's the guy I look up to.
Very cool. Excellent. What's a typical day in your life look like?
My wife's sitting here smiling at me. Well, it starts about 5 a.m. every day. I probably put, it depends if I'm bidding logging jobs that day or land clearing jobs for the company that I work for, or if I'm actually cutting timber that day, it just depends. But it's always starts with work. The phone never stops. That drives me nuts some days. These cell phones are almost a hindrance in life anymore.
Right.
Because everybody is so contactable, and the second you don't get back with somebody, they're texting you wondering what's wrong or why you're mad or whatever.
Yep.
With social media, life is full of drama. We've created our own drama in this country.
Yeah.
But, it's just, I have children, I've got a boy that's 23 that's out of the house, one that's 19 that just graduated last year, and he's, works at the sheriff's department. I got one that's going to graduate this year that still lives in the house. And I've got an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old boy. So they keep us busy, then trying to do the outfitting business and do this show. This show really takes a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Through emails and, editing, working with my editor and, the guys on the team and trying to make them, feel good and appreciated. And just in general, I mean, it's just a busy, stinking life every day.
Very good. And here's the last question, and it's a little different than your regular day, but what's a typical deer hunting day in your life look like?
If I'm at home, it's usually rushing, trying to get things done at work because that deer is going to do what you want him to do that night, and you need to be in the tree stand. So you're rushing through what you need to do during that day, and then you have those butterflies in your stomach from the minute you wake up till the time you get settled in that stand all day long. Those are the days I live for.
That's interesting. Butterflies from the beginning of the day, because that's the time you're going to be out there. That's very interesting. Very good. Those are the 10 rapid fire questions, Ben. I appreciate you going through that exercise. Where can we find more information about you and your projects, Whitetail Edge, everything that you've got going on, if we haven't answered those questions during this time frame? Sure.
Yeah. So you can go to, we have a channel on YouTube called Whitetail Edge TV.
Okay.
You just go in the search button, hit that. We're on Carbon TV. You can download the Carbon app on your phone or get on the computer and watch it. We have 2 seasons, season 1 and season 2. Season 1 was our first stab at it, and, it was good. A lot of good deer hunts on there. Our sound quality, you can tell that we were beginners, on doing our own thing on that year. I look at some of those shows and, very thankful that we were able to get out there and be seen. But compared to this year's shows, season 2, there's just no comparison of how we look compared to then, on our own level.
Yeah.
So I'm real proud of it. I'm very thankful for all the guys on the team and just, but Carbon TV, YouTube, whitetailedge.com, that you can find us. You just Google Ben Rising and things are going to pop up.
Gotcha. Very cool, man. I appreciate your time, Ben. This has been a fascinating journey through your life and your strategies and techniques. And I think you opened up quite a few eyes to how you go about your methodology. And I think our listeners will greatly appreciate it. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, and hope I didn't offend anybody because I'm good at that sometimes.
All right. Well, thanks to Ben Rising for joining us on the Big Buck Podcast. He's got just a wealth of knowledge, and he's a machine. The way I was introduced to Ben was on a Halloween walk with one of my good deer hunting friends, and he said, you got to have Ben on the show. He is a deer killing machine, and he kills huge deer. And you can now see why he gets there, why he shoots the big ones. He reminds me a little bit of Dan Info, and how they target a specific buck. They target bedding areas They target a certain time frame, and they go in when the kill is right. After learning, and I mean learning, studying, they could write a textbook on the habits of that buck before they actually knock the arrow. Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yeah, and it's
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
I'm going to touch base on this scent lock enforcer that we got in the mail, Jay. And it's quite amazing what this little unit has brought to the table. I've been doing some trial and error, and I can't say that I'll be hunting without it anymore. As far as my clothing and my boots, I wear my hunting boots to check some trail cameras, come back, and there's a little odor in them from where I was sweating. Ran the enforcer down in there for 5 minutes each side, took a smell of them, said, oh my goodness. It literally knocked the smell right out of my boots, Jay.
I've been experimenting myself with our little unit that we have, and I have to agree with you. I loaded it up in the small bathroom that we have, and within 5 minutes, the entire, I think it's 10 by 10 by 9-foot ceiling in there. And it was just, you open the door, you could smell ozone.
It's amazing.
It's really just this little unit. It's just this little tiny unit. It's crazy.
I don't think that I'll be putting clothes on that hasn't been ran with this.
Right. I mean, if it can fill up a room that size in 5 minutes, then you can do it in any portable closet type thing or tote.
Your pickup truck,
you name it. But it really does eliminate the smell because, I've tested it on a few other odoriferous items, and it really does knock it down. It's crazy.
It is really crazy.
It smells like a nice fresh rainstorm.
You're exactly right.
Isn't that right?
That's exactly the smell. Once you smell the ozone, it's something that you've smelled in the woods before. Scent lock enforcer, I don't think I'm going to go without it come hunting season for a long time.
Excellent, my friend. Very, very good tip of the week there, Dusty. I appreciate that. Dusty, where can we find you when you're not hanging out here in the studios with me?
Shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Instagram and Twitter @ChasingAntler, Facebook.com/Chubby Tines Outdoors. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Likewise, you can shoot me an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com, and you can visit us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Twitter, which is twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. We're also on Instagram, instagram.com/bigbuckregistry, and YouTube, which is youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. On YouTube, you can listen to all of our podcasts in their entirety. As far as videos are concerned, it's a boring video, but the audio content is there, so you can actually listen to our podcast. You can also listen to all of our live shows that we've done on Thursday nights when we do them, and we've gone back and re-interviewed a lot of our previous guests we had on the show just to put a face to a voice, let's put it that way. You can always listen to our show on other places as well, not just YouTube. We're found on iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Blueberry. And if you would like to submit a buck to our page for consideration and be featured on our page in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans, all you have to do is go to bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all of the instructions will be right there. I think that's pretty much everywhere we're at. I think that's a wrap, Dusty.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.